Good morning. I grew up in a household with the Medal of Honor on the wall. And so for me, the Medal of Honor was part of my normal. But I am never any less humbled when I have the opportunity to introduce and to share with other people the incredible courage and character that it takes to have survived these things that these gentlemen went through. And so it is my privilege at this point to introduce to you Clint Romesha, who is here to talk to you today.
First, let me thank you guys so much for taking the time today to come out to this truly remarkable event. Secondly, I'd like to say, if you're a veteran, if you've served, whether it was for one short enlistment of 3 years or a career of 20, I want to personally thank you for your service and your sacrifice to this nation. Thank you so much. Also, if you're a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, an uncle, an aunt, if you're a family member of a service member, I want to thank you also for your service and sacrifice, because it's a family business. It's not one person leaving to go overseas. It's that whole community, it's that family that holds together and is there for them when they come home. Thank you so much for everything you've been through. A little bit about myself. I'm Clint, that's what I go by. Nothing more, nothing less. I grew up actually here in California, right up on the Oregon-Nevada border in a tiny little town called Cedarville. Population about 500, which I get to brag because when I went to school, I was in the top 15 of my class when I graduated, out of the 14 that went. I'd lived there all my life. My family had moved there from the days of the covered wagon. I guess they couldn't continue on south where the weather's a little bit nicer. They like the mountains and the snow. Like I said, my family came from a long line of military service. From my grandfather, World War II, my dad, Vietnam. Both my older brothers served. When I graduated high school, I kind of knew I was going to go in the service. One, because if you've seen my high school grades, there probably wasn't a college out there besides maybe Chico State that would have picked me up. But I was still 17. I was still 17 when I graduated high school, and I remember, that's all I ever wanted to do from the time I could, pick a job, I guess. There was a point where I wanted to be a paleontologist, but I realized I couldn't even spell that. So I went to my father, who, like I said, was a Vietnam vet, and he didn't talk a whole lot about what he did. I just knew he served. He was proud of his service, but he didn't talk about what he actually had done. And when I asked Dad, hey, I'm graduating here in a few weeks. I've already talked to the recruiter. As soon as I graduate, I want to ship. You're kicking me out of the house anyways, the graduation present. I think that year was luggage. So the hint was given. And I told him, I'm still 17 though, so the recruiter says you have to sign for me. And I remember my dad pulling me to the side and saying, look, Clint, right now, it's 1999. We didn't have a whole lot going on. Kosovo was kind of the thing that was kind of starting, but nothing major. And he said, Clint, our nation's pretty much at peace right now. And if you decide to go serve your country, just because we're at peace right now doesn't mean we're always going to be that way. There'll come a day, maybe not tomorrow and maybe not in 20 years, but if you sign up to go do, your nation's going to call upon you to go and do things you'll never forget, experiences that you should never have to experience, and to make sure that you understand what you're getting into before you go. He's like, I will not do that for you. You'll turn 18, and as a man, in the eyes of this country, you can sign on your own. Day after my 18th birthday, I signed up for the Army. Shipped out about a month later and went down to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Did my basic down in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and my first duty station was Vilseck, Germany. When I got to Germany, within 2 weeks, my unit was already forward deployed to Kosovo. 2 weeks, brand new soldier, got to Germany for a little bit of orientation, and I got shipped off. And I'd taken for granted, and I didn't realize it at that point, but when I got on the ground in Kosovo, I'd taken for granted the last 18 years of my life. Simple little things as driving down the street to go fill up your car with gas. We were escorting Albanians through Serbian towns so they wouldn't get massacred. Serbians through Albanian towns to go get gas. Having pencils and backpacks and paper. We were dropping it off at school so these kids had something to write on for their education. And it hit me, crap. I complained because the TV was out one day because of a snowstorm. Had the easy life. This wonderful thing we have, this freedom that we were all given at birth, I just squandered it. Didn't realize the service, the sacrifice that was truly before me until I got put in that position. And that's when it hit me. I joined the Army for one reason, and that was because I thought I wanted to serve. I wanted to be part of my family's legacy. But I realized I didn't join for that. I ended up serving for something greater. That patriotism of this country, for those brothers to my left and right, for this great nation. And that's really what the character development program shows, our next generation, the kids that are going to lead this country forward, our next great leaders. That is me as a 17-year-old kid that barely passed high school, that thought, at 100 pounds, what difference can I make? You can make all the difference in the world if you put your mind to it. If you understand there are no limits. We've been given these gifts of freedom right off the bat. And there's no challenge too big, no mission too difficult. Just continue forward. Normally, I'd kind of set up here and I'd talk about the battle that day. The video helped kind of elaborate on it, but more importantly, what I'd rather do, I'd like to have a Q&A. Let's have just a discussion. Let's ask questions. Don't think you're going to ask the wrong question. If I don't want to answer it, I just won't answer it. Oh, and no math and no spelling. That's the other.
We found out we were going to be here yesterday, so I grabbed that book, The Outpost. And as I was reading it, it came up in your vignette as well. You should have been there to begin with. It was an undefensible position. So, is there, with hindsight, like any ill feelings towards the decision to put a base there at all? How do you deal with that?
The question basically is, the hindsight of should we have been there or shouldn't we have been there. One of the things I think we kind of forget about nowadays, I joined an all-volunteer Army. Everyone I served with to my left and right got to put that right arm up and say, I'm going to go do this. Not too long ago, we had an Army that was go to war or go to jail. You're getting drafted. One of the most beautiful things that I've seen in my career in the military was the fact that you got these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that freely said, I'm going to go serve, I'm going to go do. And when they raise that right hand and they take that oath, they give up that freedom to say, no, that's a dumb decision you're making, sir. I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home. They don't get that opportunity. That's the sacrifice that is given up. That freedom of choice to say, no, even though this doesn't make sense, I still got a job to do. I got a duty to my country, and more importantly, I got a duty to my buddies to my left and right. I got a commitment that I need to fulfill. And in hindsight, yeah, it was a crappy spot. I remember writing a letter back home to my grandma, basically saying, hey, Grandma, I'm here, I'm fine, everything's good. These mountains are beautiful, you can look up at them all day. Reminds me kind of being back at home in the Warner Mountains. And a little while later, I got a letter back, a few weeks, and it was about the third thing she had said was, What the heck are you doing looking up at mountains? How do you defend that? My grandma understood off a couple of lines where we were at. And we lucked out. My platoon actually kind of lucked out in a way because Sergeant Kirk, he was just in that area of Afghanistan 8 months prior. He was operating in the same valleys. He knew the terrain. And of course, before we went over, we'd gotten all the briefs. It's steep, it's treacherous, it's where you're at. It's not a great spot, but it's decent. We all kind of knew it was going to be a little messed up. And to have Kirk there with us during our train up to say, no, guys, we need to be physically fit. We're going to be running up and down mountains that you dang near need a rope just to get up. We need to make sure our guys know how to angle fire, because when you start shooting up and down elevation, it changes your distance. Because if we got any physics teachers in here, we all know that gravity's the same no matter whether it's up or down. It's a constant pull on a bullet. And that kind of helped give us a leg up to know what we were getting into. But it wasn't until the very first night of getting into Cop Keating, because the only way we could access it was by helicopter. Our nearest U.S. forces were about 33 kilometers away. You used to be able to drive there, but the enemy had basically cut off the drivable path. You couldn't really fit Humvees or anything bigger in a little Toyota pickup down that road. And so as we landed there in the helicopter that night, I remember getting out of the back of it and looking out and trying to scan. We had our night vision goggles on. And normally when you're looking in your night vision goggles, you can distinguish between the horizon and the ground. You can tell where the sky changes, even though it's pitch black. There I remember just kept looking and everything was black. And I thought to myself, oh shoot, my night vision goggles must be messed up. Something's wrong with them. And it wasn't until that next morning when the sun came out and I got out and I realized the reason I couldn't tell the difference is because unless you were looking darn near straight up, you couldn't see the sky. We were funneled in. And then to see the rest of the platoon get there, like I said, these young 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids. For most of the guys in my platoon, this was their very first deployment. That was my third. I'd been put in some situations that were less than favorable. But it was so inspiring, so motivational to watch these young kids get there and realize, look, we had no choice in where we're getting stationed. This is where we got told we needed to come and defend. And it doesn't matter what the situation is around it. We're going to change whatever we can to make the best of a crappy situation. You can give us the worst of the worst, or we're not going to sit there and think, oh, poor us. We're going to make a difference. We're going to do that little extra, add a defensive position here, make sure our physical fitness was up to run all day long. Let's affect what we can affect and make the most of that. And it's a beautiful thing. It's just a rarity to see.
What was the mission being in that area less than favorable position in the first place?
Question was, what was our mission there? At that time in Afghanistan, we had kind of shifted over to controlling the population centers and do counterinsurgencies and trying to build a rapport with the locals. We were trying to do some of that, but unfortunately with our small numbers, normally you had one platoon that would do patrols and one platoon that would do perimeter security. We just didn't quite have the manpower to walk up to the Camdish, the big city that we were kind of close by. And initially that outpost got established there as a forward operating base for U.S. forces still pushing north. And it was only going to be a temporary thing for refit and refuel as we continue to push north for a better position. But when the surge kicked off in Iraq, resources, of course, got pulled out of Afghanistan. And since the mission kind of ended for continuing north, it was, we've got the terrain, we need to hold it. So in case we come back, we don't have to refight for something and reestablish. All in all, the mission was to try and assist the local government into taking care of themselves, more or less.
What made you continue to reenlist?
Question was, why did I continue to reenlist? I have no idea. I joined up thinking I was going to do 3 years. I was going to go get to see Germany, drink at 18 years old, be back when I was 21. Really, it was, when I joined, when I got in, when I realized the camaraderie from your platoon mates, from your brothers, realized there's something more here than just showing up for a paycheck every day. I could look back and say, I contributed something. My grandfather sacrificed, my dad sacrificed, and I need to pay that debt because they've already paid it. And for my family, it was something I felt was taking care of them. We got a paycheck every month. My first daughter came when we were in Germany. It was just a great sense of pride to be part of something more than just oneself. But it was also something I always wanted to do. I was natural at it. It felt good. I enjoyed taking 18, 19-year-old kids that, they had never learned how to make a bed growing up. They didn't know how to do their own laundry. And watch them grow and develop. And I could tell, who was going to be successful in life. And you could get those kids that you knew were just troublemakers. That just didn't quite fit in anywhere. But once they got in the military and they seen the discipline, the structure, turn their lives around. And it was inspiring to be part of that, to be one of the gears in this mechanism of life, and to kind of give back. And I enjoyed it. Got out after 12 years. I'd have loved to stay for 20, but it was time to go. But I never, ever thought I'd be in for more than 3.
So what would your typical day look like? Like from the morning you got up, the weather, here, how heavy was that?
Question was kind of what was our typical day there? It all depended, like I said, either for 1 week at a time you're on force protection and the other week you're on patrol. So on a force protection week, you normally wake up in the morning and we had just enough personnel to run a 1-for-1 time shift. So for every 1 hour you were on guard, you got 1 hour off. And you did that for a week. And we'd try and structure it for about a 4-hour block so you could try and get maybe 4 hours in between. That ran for 7 days straight. And we got there at the beginning of spring, the end of summer, and it would get up into the triple digits. With the river that ran right along our outpost, the humidity would just roll off that, just miserable. We got fed a hot meal about once every 3 days because of the aircraft supply and stuff. It's not going to come out. You can't call them up like Domino's and they're going to be there in 30 minutes or less. Ate a lot of MREs, and then more importantly, when people would send mail, I'd send a lot of Jimmy Deans or Stack Packs or this, that, or whatever. And then you'd get creative with your MREs. You'd open about 5 or 6 of them to make one meal that was somewhat palatable. The gear we wore on force protection would kind of strip down all the extra ammo for your personal weapon, because normally you had a cruiser of a 50 cal machine gun or 240 machine gun, a light machine gun, or a Mark 19, a fully automatic grenade launcher. So you're basically just in your kit, your Kevlar, your body armor. And then when you'd switch over to patrol week, that's when you'd put your full kit back on. And we were weighing in, and I was 134 pounds, and I think I stepped on the scale once at 175 or something like that. Because you're trying to carry your water, you're trying to carry your ammo, you're trying to carry just enough food to kind of sustain you for your 6 or 8 hour patrol. And every patrol was straight up the mountain. So it was a smoker. At one point, the enemy had attacked us and taken out our submergible pump that sat in the river that we'd use to shower from. So in waiting for that to get repaired almost a month and a half, we were down to 1 shower a week. So you get to really feel how close you are to your battle buddies when you're sleeping in a little building that's 30 by maybe 20, and you're stacked 2 to a bunk just a couple of feet away. you really get a sense of closeness at that point. But it was fun. In our downtime, we like to play practical jokes on each other. My two team leaders, Larson and Raz, at one point had roped a goat from the locals, and as my lieutenant was trying to sleep in his bunk one morning, they decided it was a great idea to take this goat after they got him and throw him in there and shut the door on him so he couldn't escape. And of course, the lieutenant wakes up in a panic that there's a goat running around in his room. And of course, we get to make fun of him because he's sitting there, a big bad lieutenant in the U.S. Army, cowering behind a pillow as a goat is staring at him. You know, it was stuff like that. You kind of broke up the day-to-day stuff. Always keeping humor about you, you know, making the best of a bad situation at times and not dwelling too much. We had a saying in our platoon. It was written up on one of the rafters in our barracks that one of the other units had left. And all it simply said is, it never gets any better. And we'd seen that, and we looked at it and we thought, you know what? It never gets any better. You know why? Because we make every day the best day it's ever going to be. And we used to get so much flack from our first sergeant and our commander because they looked at it. When they seen that saying, they thought it was the end of the world. Well, it never gets any better because we never get anything good. No, it was quite the opposite. And to see these guys take a mentality such as that we're going to make this day the best day ever. And when we wake up tomorrow, we're going to make it better than the day before. And to continue forward with that just mentality was, I mean, just crucial.
Yeah, this is the book, by the way, that the gentleman referenced, The Outpost. And I think if you have any time at all, I highly recommend it. It's a tremendous book. And one of the things in reading this that kind of made me nervous is your relationship with the AANA. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Vietnam in terms of you didn't necessarily know who your friends or enemies were. How difficult was it dealing with
Now that
AANA?
the question is the difficulty of dealing with the AANA. And the AANA is the Afghan National Army. And we were embedded with them. They owned basically the eastern side of the camp. And then the Latvian Army covered down on training them. When we first got there, I think they were called like the 3rd Camdish something or other. Those AANA soldiers were some of the best soldiers I'd ever seen. Those guys would go out before us, they'd clear the path, they'd go up on the tippy tops of the mountain, they'd provide overwatch, and you knew those guys had your back. You got nothing but respect for that particular group. The day that everything happened, though, they'd switched out. We had another group of AANA soldiers that you almost had to hold at gunpoint to get outside the wire to do their own patrols in their own country. And you'd try and work with them, but they didn't care. And when that attack kicked off that day, I think there was 34 of them. They bounced on us on the first bullet that came in. They rolled out. And it was discouraging to see such a well-trained troop, you know, unit of Afghans that took pride in their country, that wanted to make a difference. And then you see the polar opposite in just one transitional phase of rotating troops out of there. And then when we got back to FOB Bostic, as we displaced farther south, we linked up with another group of AANA soldiers that were just as good as that first group. And then we rotated some out. We got another group that was just as bad as that second group. So it was hit and miss. You know, it would have been awesome to have everyone on the same sheet of music there, but it's just not possible.
When you went on patrols, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, can you talk to us a little bit if you guys had been in contact with the people of those countries and how that went down? I'm assuming you had a translator there, or just, I guess what I wonder is what that dynamic is between folks like you and those individuals on the ground from those countries.
So the question is kind of geared at when we went on patrols, kind of our engagement with the locals and our interaction. Just depending on what type of patrol we were doing. Some patrols were strictly a go-out clearance mission, find out what's in the area. So we didn't deal anything with the locals. Some patrols were specifically targeted to go out with the locals, engage them. Hey, what do you guys need? What are we doing that's pissing you off? What are we doing to make relationships better? You know, how's your school system doing? How's this going on? And you'd try and build a rapport. And that was the other thing I witnessed over there, is we had some villages that we would go into, and they would tell us, hey, you're safe while you're here. We will protect you. We never got shot at. going in, coming out. They were there to protect us 100%. They wanted to embrace what we were trying to do. We had some villages we went in that you didn't roll a platoon in there. You rolled in with a company plus because you knew you were taking contact. And once you got in the village and you tried to start the rapport with the leadership, they'd give you lip service. Yeah, they'd say, oh yeah, we'll take that $20,000 to build that school. And once the project got started, no school would go up. So it was a double-edged sword of finding out what villages were truly wanting to make better themselves. And there was no set system to say you can build a rapport with this group or not with this group. And I don't know why certain villages were that way and some weren't.
Your family has a very history in war. Your grandfather came back, he celebrated soldiers in World War II. Dad came back to divide the nation. How was the response to you coming back to what was a politically divided nation?
The question was, what was my experience of coming back? I will tell you this. I cannot thank the Vietnam generation enough. They came back in a time in our country where our soldiers got blamed for political choices, that the tip of the spear got blamed for who was thrusting it. And it was disgusting. We squandered our freedom of speech back then. We took advantage of these guaranteed rights we have, and we did something very disgusting and disrespectful to our great servicemen and women. But it's been that Vietnam generation that every time I came home, it was to cheering crowds and warm welcomes and thanks of service. And it was truly genuine. And it was because of that generation that happened. And we cannot forget, my generation cannot forget that. And we need to carry it forward. We need to make sure we understand as a nation that this is a democracy. That we can't blame that soldier for going to do stuff that we voted, that we chose the representative that then turned around and made them go and do. We got to hold our country ourselves responsible for our actions, not just the actions of someone quick and easy to blame coming home. And I've been truly blessed, and I hope I never see that again in my life, and I try and do everything to make sure it doesn't. So as I made the question was, what do I do now? As I made my transition out of the military in 2011, I didn't quite know what I was going to do because unfortunately for a lot of the combat arms guys, when you make that transition out, we didn't quite have the skill sets of a welder, an x-ray tech, or something of that nature. I was scared. I thought, I'm going to put in a job application and about the only thing I'm going to be qualified for is a security guard at a mall. Because there's not too many people out there that need someone that can shoot over 800 meters, carry 120 pounds of gear on their back, and run 12 miles in friggin' 4 hours. What the heck was I going to do? I lucked out because my brother-in-law had went up to North Dakota. And at that time in North Dakota, the oil boom was going on. And when you're making that transition out of the military, the scariest thing is the language. You learn a whole different language in the military than what people that hadn't been talk. I ended up getting a job as a field safety specialist for a construction company. And the first thing I thought was, why the heck would they hire me? I'm the most unsafe guy ever. But I quickly learned that field was looking for people who could follow rules and regulations, could enforce those rules and regulations, had attention to detail, and would show up to work on time. Shoot, I'd been doing that for the last 12 years. So for me, it actually ended up being a fairly smooth transition. And I'd worked at this with this construction company until about a year and a half ago, right after I received my medal. So I do some outreach still with a lot of the energy companies up there for hiring veterans to get that word out there that, look, you guys are speaking what you want to each other, but you're just not quite understanding the language. Let's tweak this, because what you guys want out there is what these veterans are coming back and can offer. Currently in the process of working on a book. And the work on the book is incorporating a lot of the guys that were there that day. And more importantly, the families, the 8 we lost. So that their stories or talked in that perspective, because I knew Gallegos quite well, but I didn't know Gallegos like Amanda did. And for something to be immortalized in print, I think it is very important that those families, like I said, that served just as much as those guys did, have their ability to put their fingerprints in it. So doing the interviews with a lot of the families and a lot of the guys there is kind of what's currently keeping me occupied.
How do you feel about your kids continuing the legacy?
The question is, how do I feel about my kids joining the military, basically? I'm going to give them the same advice as my dad, because I think that's one of the greatest things we have in this nation is that freedom of choice. You can go and do whatever you want to do. You can make any mistake you want. Hope you learn from it. And I hope I instill into them enough knowledge to make good decisions, but more importantly, to know that, don't ever let someone tell you what you can and can't do. That's on you to find out for yourself. So when it comes to that day, if my son or my daughters come up to me and say, "Hey, Dad, I want to serve," I'm going to tell them the same. Make sure you know what you're getting into before you go. Understand this choice you're going to make. Because I can't tell you, I can tell you what it's like being in combat, but you don't ever know until you're there. Just like my father told me. I had no idea. I thought I knew. I'd watched movies. I watched John Wayne. I played video games. Nothing compares. There's not even words that come close to describing.
Yeah, I was sort of curious about your feelings and the events that surrounded from when you found out you were going to receive the Medal of Honor to the ceremony itself.
The question is, what were my feelings from finding out about receiving the medal up to actually receiving it? After the actions that day, of course, there was a lot of talk when we came back about we need to put people in for the awards. My personal belief is I didn't give a crap about me. I wanted to make sure my guys got what they deserved, and I didn't give a crap any more than that. We walked away, I think, 9 silver stars out of that battle. Had 3 team leaders, 3 E5s got a silver star coming out of there, and I thought they deserved more than that. Initially, I got told I got put in for a Distinguished Service Cross, which is the award below the Medal of Honor. And when I heard that at first, I told them, I don't really give a crap. Make sure these guys are taken care of. We got back from deployment. Most of the guys, by then, the paperwork, the process had gone through. Pretty much everyone had received most of their medals. I was, at that point, deciding I was getting out of the military. Actually, me and my wife had decided before that deployment that was going to be my last one. And I was making my transition out. A lot of my buddies were asking me, "Hey, are they going to give you anything before you go?" I told them the same thing. "Well, you got yours, didn't you?" "Yeah, that's all I give a crap about." I got out of the military. Didn't hear anything. Didn't know nothing. Some time passed, and I'd call my buddies, ask them how they're doing, the ones that are still in, and of course I'd hear this thing, "Hey man, I heard from this guy that knows the general's daughter that, your award should be any minute now," or, "Hey, I heard from this guy that knows this guy at the Pentagon that this is happening," and I'd tell them, whatever, I haven't heard anything. And they were pissed. How did they let you out of the military without anything? And I'd tell them the same thing. I didn't care what I did. I know what you guys did. You guys are what made stuff happen that day. And I was at work one day. I was out there in the oil fields, sitting in my truck. My personal phone rang, which was rare because most everyone that knew me, that if I was at work, called my work phone. And it was a number I did not recognize, so of course, like an idiot, I answered it. And I answered the phone, and it's Colonel Davis on the other end of the line, introduces himself, asks me to verify who I am. Tell him, "Hey, it's Clint Romesha." Of course, he's like, "Oh, you mean former Staff Sergeant Romesha?" "Yeah, whatever. Clint." And he's like, "Well, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I can't tell you over the phone, but we need you to come back to D.C. And instantly I think, what the hell did I do to get in trouble? I've been out of the military for a while now. Don't the statutes of limitation apply here? What am I getting in trouble for? And I politely told him, "Hey, look, I just started this job. I don't have any vacation days." I can't get away from work, and I hung up on him. Gave it a couple of weeks, I went home, told my wife, and she said, well, that's weird, you know what it's about? And I said, well, I don't know. It's probably about an award or something. Gave it some more time, and I finally was like, all right, I better do the right thing and quit being a jackass. And I called him back up. Hey, sir, talk to my boss. He'll give me a weekend off. He's like, all right, well, we'll fly you out here and get you all taken care of. I've been Iraq, been to Afghanistan, spent time in Germany. I was so scared when I flew into D.C. and I got on that metro. Who travels under the ground? It was just confusing to me. But of course, I got a full bird colonel that picks me up from the airport, puts me in the metro, we go onto the ground, we show up at the Pentagon, and I still got bags in hand, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on? I must really have screwed up. Because we get through security, and it's a breeze, and I'm like, well, that's weird. Normally they strip search you coming into places like this, but I'm getting kind of a free pass. Then all of a sudden, colonels and generals and everybody's coming up to me and congratulate me. And I'm thinking, oh, am I really in trouble or am I really, really in trouble? And finally they take me into a conference room and they set me down. As I sit down, I look at the table in front of me and there's 3 posters sitting there. One's a Sal Junta, one's a Leroy Petrie, and the third one's a Sergeant Sabo, Vietnam recipient posthumously. And I see Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor. And of course, they start in with the brief, and they're talking this, and they're talking that. Like many of your students, I'm sure, I zoned them out. I was like Charlie Brown in the Peanuts cartoon, just want. And I just kept staring there, and they kept talking, and I don't know what they were saying. Finally, I looked up, and I called a timeout. I'm like, hey, guys, what the hell is going on here? One of the colonels or generals or whatever looks over, and he's like, well, what do you mean? So, well, what's this? See, Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor. And he goes, well, you don't know? And I said, no, I don't know. I wouldn't ask if I knew. And he says, well, you've been recommended for the Medal of Honor. All it is waiting for is the president's signature. And I looked back at him and I said, why me? There was 8 other guys that deserve that thing. Why me? I didn't do anything more than 52 other guys. I just did my job. And they started talking again, and I didn't pay attention. But immediately after that, they took me out, and I got to go meet retired General Foley, Vietnam recipient. And he set me down. We talked for about an hour. And as we started our conversation, I asked General Foley the same thing. I mean, General Foley was the first Medal of Honor recipient I'd ever met. Never in a million years would think I'd ever meet one, let alone be one. And I asked him the same thing, why me? I didn't do anything more, and he cut me off right there. And he said, that's why. Because your men are the ones that believe that you deserve this. It's a nomination from them. And it blew me away. And my guys believed that I did something that great. No, I just did the same thing they did. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's why when I put on this little blue ribbon of silk, it's not mine, it's theirs. It's for all those soldiers that not only served that day, but for our military of past, military of present, and unfortunately our military of the future that's going to continue this legacy. When I put this thing on, when I have a decision to make in life, I reflect back to those 8 guys. What would they think of me with this choice I'm about to make? Would they be honored, or would they turn away in disgust? I've been given the ability to come and talk about Gallegos and Kirk and Mace. Martin, Scusa, Griffin. Hart. I knew as soon as he left that barracks, there was no telling that guy no. He was going to go do, accomplish. But as soon as he left that door, I knew that was the last I was going to see of him. Why not him? He went full in, knowing all or nothing. And it goes back to no one survived that Humvee. There was no firsthand account of what actually happened up in that Humvee. A Bronze Star with V was the highest we could get him. I thought, Hart, Gallegos, first two in my mind. Those are the guys. But I've got a chance now to share that, to continue their legacy, their memory, because there's nothing worse than being forgotten. And if we don't get out and we talk about the selfless sacrifice, the service, the commitment to more than just ourselves, we're a nation that's going to be lost when we get away from our values. Because our values is what makes us. It's that foundation everything comes from. You see it today in some of your students, though. You see that they have priorities. They want to pass this test. They want to go hang out after school and go to a party. They got a priority to save money and get a car. But unfortunately, priorities change. Priorities change every time we have an opportunity. But values never do. There's no one value that's higher than the next. They're all equal. And when we have a foundation of values and we relate back to them, we can't go wrong. We just can't go wrong with that. Can I be more at your level?
Oh, I wasn't coming up there, that's for sure. We could listen to you talk all day, and some of us would really like to, but there's also lunch waiting and more to learn this afternoon. I have to say, after hearing Clint talk again, that I think he speaks, if the Medal of Honor Society really had a slogan, it would be, I was just doing my job. And we can't thank you enough. And thank you for coming here today and taking the time to spend with us.